Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Andrew.
Here we are in the land of properly connected internet. We hope. Knock on linoleum.
And very stable mic stands.
Oh yeah, yeah. You got yelled at for that last week. We're quite the motley crew.
Always something.
So today, four layers of a what is it?
Of
What poetic titled? Four
The
layers of.
poetic title is 4 Layers of Drone Reed Sound.
Okay, I like it. I like it.
That was poetic.
Yeah, 4 layers of drone read sound.
Everything good in my life comes in layers. Last night I went to hang out with my parents. We had a 7-layer dip followed by a
Mm,
2-layer cake, you
mm.
know? Of course, the
You know,
immortal words of the poet Donkey, parfaits have layers, right?
how religious, I mean, maybe religious isn't the right word, but how religious is your local maker of 7-layer dip?
Oh, it's exactly the same every single time
Yeah.
because, yes, it is a holy, sacred, never to be altered, you know, handed down for generations kind of thing, yeah.
Do you find the further west you go, the more serious they are about the 7 layers? Because and this is just a question, I don't actually know the answer, but I feel like I was first personally introduced to the 7-layer dip while living on the West Coast, and there were always 7 perfect layers. It didn't matter who made it. It's like
Yep.
people take it seriously,
Y okay,
west of
yeah.
the Rocky Mountains. But then here in the East Coast, it's, "Oh, I brought 7-layer dip." I'm looking at this dip. This is a joke. There's not even remotely 7 layers here, and it's all messy, and people think it's 7-layer dip, and it's not.
No, Andrew, that's a very real thing. I mean, I'm pretty far west right now myself, and I can tell you, when you show up to a party where there's a 7-layer dip, it's in a glass container
Yes, gotta
so
be
that
glass. That's
everyone
right.
can see. You lift up that pan, you take a look, 1, 2, 3,
1,
4, there's the
2, 3,
7
4, 5,
layers,
6, 7.
you know?
And the layers, I feel like the layers can change sometimes, and that doesn't bug
Yeah,
me. It doesn't like,
yeah.
the specific ingredients or ordering of the ingredients, that doesn't bug me, but don't call it 7 layers if there's not 7 layers.
Then it wouldn't be a 7-layer dip. If
Okay.
you have to repeat layers, that's okay, you gotta hit 7. So if you have to go like beans, avocado, sour cream, beans again, that's okay, but still
Yeah,
hit the 7,
100% agree. And maybe you don't like whatever. Maybe you don't like lettuce or something, although I feel like it's like the icing on the cake.
That's only ever the top layer, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, lettuce in the middle would be a disaster, Jim.
Makes no sense.
Anyway, so now that we've got that out of the way, we've got 4 layers of a drone read. And this is the kind of thing where this is one of those things where as a bagpiper teacher dude, you totally take it for granted, and your students
Mhm.
really wish that you didn't because it's something they'd really like
Mm.
to know, right? And it's just something that
Yeah,
we've experienced, and you sort of subjectively learn it over time, and then you just kind of know that it's there, but a beginner doesn't really. And so I have found that it's worth kind of talking through what it is, because once you talk through it, you're like, "Oh, okay. Got it." And it can help
yeah.
with things such as strike-ins. Like, for example, when we're striking in our pipes, or maybe more specifically when we're doing a pipe band attack, it's good to have an awareness of the 4 layers, because that general awareness is going to sort of inform what our technique needs to allow us to be able to do.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Give it a name and define it, that way you can address it.
Yeah.
If it's
And
not defined,
and it's something any bagpiper would eventually learn, but
Mhm.
why not just talk it through? So you wanna talk it through?
Let's talk it through, yeah.
Yeah. So I have my trusty bagpipe over here. This is
Mhm.
actually my teaching bagpipe. When we
Ah,
did, just to do a little product placement here, when we did the transition to the bagpipes course, I emailed Stuart over at McCallum Bagpipes, and I was like, "Hey, I'm doing this course. I could really use a fresh set of bagpipes that I can during our transitioning to the bagpipes course at the dojo." That's what we do. We actually film the course. The pipes are literally still in the box, and
mm.
then we unbox them and we put the pipes together from scratch, and we get them going really well. So this is that bagpipe. So thanks, McCallum Bagpipes. So here's a drone reed, and I've got it hooked into my drone here, and I'm gonna mouth blow the reed. And while we're here, when you mouth blow a drone reed, I'm gonna put my mouth on it, and you'll see these, like, on any typical drone reed, you'll see these bridles. Okay, I'm just gonna make sure
Mhm.
my mouth is above those bridles. Um, or at the very minimum, maybe your mouth can touch this top bridle, but You want it above the bridles so that like you're not getting spit and saliva and you're not touching your lip to the actual vibrating tongue of the reed here,
Right.
right? Because that could affect the sound of the reed. So we want to keep it off of that, but that's all I'm going to do. So I'm basically just going to use my mouth to operate the reed. Okay. So I'm going to do,
Mhm.
I'm going to do it. Let me make sure. I don't think it'll sound too distorted, but here we go. Right. So I just blew into my reed with my mouth. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what we'll notice when we blow in a reed is that the reed will kind of travel through 4 layers of sound. Okay. The
Mhm.
first layer of sound is the squeaky layer. So you get the squeaky layer of sound typically when you don't have enough pressure yet applied to the reed.
Mm.
Like it's sort of this high pitched squeaky sound. I actually think that it's probably just not giving us the fundamental frequency that we're looking for, and we're actually just getting some of those harmonics. Sometimes
Yeah, some
sometimes if this first layer sort of becomes prolonged, and I don't know exactly why that would be, but it does happen. You end up with the drone, playing the bagpipe with the drone kind of stuck in that layer 1, really high pitch.
yes.
And sometimes you would call that double tone. A piper would call it double toning. Now, sometimes a different strike-in technique, maybe a little bit more abrupt, a little bit more firm, that can help avoid that first layer of squeakiness from being prolonged, or you can skip through. But the next layer is the gurgly, nasty layer. So once we clear through the first layer, so it's like
Yeah.
it's actually the reed hasn't kicked in yet. And I don't really know. It would be great to talk to somebody who knows, but I don't really know why this is the case. But there's a second layer where the drone has not sort of like clicked in to its optimal layer yet. And it's sort of
Mhm.
like this, like, it's sort of the crust layer. We haven't really reached the surface of the earth. We're sort of in the crust. And then if I blow a little bit more pressure through the reed, that layer is going to clear. And then I'm in my stable, optimal layer 3. That's what we're shooting for when
Mhm.
we have a drone reed. See how it went gurgly gurgly and then it resolved and
Mhm.
that's the stable tone. And that is the land that we want to live in.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, there are 4, you may recall, Jim. We're talking about 4 layers here. And the 4th
Yeah, what
layer
is it for?
most of us are already kind of familiar with. The 4th layer is no sound at all because we've blown so hard through the reed that it's sort of become overwhelmed with air and that tongue clamps down on the reed and the reed shuts off. Right? So when you blow all the way through and the pressure becomes too much, the reed shuts off.
Mhm.
So let's do review pop quiz. The first layer is just the squeaky, unpredictable sounds.
Mhm.
And they might sound different depending on your drone reeds and your bagpipes, but it's squeaky, it's unpredictable. It doesn't have that much to do with the sound of a bagpipe drone yet. Okay.
Mhm.
Then the next layer beyond that is the gurgly sublayer, the gurgly, low pitched, raucous, unpure sublayer. Okay.
Mhm.
See how it's doesn't, I don't know if you can hear it that well on the microphone, but
Yeah, we're
it's like
hearing it for sure, yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
it sounds like a tone, but it's not nice and it's rough.
Mhm.
And then in this read, a little bit more pressure, it starts to gurgle. That's sort of indicating that we're getting close. And then, so here's that. And then we get the gurgle, and then just beyond the gurgle, and it locks in,
Yeah.
and then that's your good pitch. Okay. And then if we blow too hard, it shuts off. So squeakies, raucous
Mm.
slash possibly gurgly, good sound, good stable zone, and then shuts off.
Mhm.
Those are the 4 layers that we're looking for. And I
West
would
Coast to
encourage
East
you,
Coast, those are always the 4.
yeah, and I would encourage you if that information isn't already obvious to you, I would encourage you to do what I just did with your own pipes. Grab a tenor drone reed and just horse around mouth blowing it for a little bit and just explore the relationship of those things. Like you might have noticed there, that reed, for whatever reason, is always really kind of squeaky. In other words, it's hard to get it to start. And I'm sure with enough adjustment or enough, playing, I could get that the way that I like it, where it starts a little bit better. But that one, it's like tough to get out of that first layer. But I'm not really worried about it. I know it's there because I understand that these 4 layers are there. So like usually when I strike in, it's like they're just kind of squeaky, but then with the right kind of strike in, I can get them in. And then when you're sort of like taking the bag and you're pushing it up under your arm, what layer are the drones usually still in during that part? So we've struck the pipes in, we've gone boing. But then as we're pushing it up under the arm and getting ready to play, what layer are we sort of in during that time? Jim, this one, I'm tossing the ball over to you.
Usually 2.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little bit of 1, but not 3 yet, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we don't really want 1. We'd like to strike the pipes in so that
Give 'em a little hit, yeah.
so that they end up in zone 2. But I'm not going to be in zone 3 yet until I'm ready to play, and then I play that chanter note, and that additional pressure of the chanter coming in will cause all the drones to settle into layer 3. That's typically
I
how
love
it
that.
works. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a cool effect. It sounds cool, right?
It's
like
so cool.
It's like, here I am in layer 2, it's very raucous, and then, here comes the chanter, it sounds nice, right? That tends
Whether
to
it's
be...
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim. No, you're good.
I was just gonna say, whether it's a soloist or a band, I can never get tired of that. The
Yep.
chaos that suddenly snaps into resolution. It's so cool.
Yeah, now, it doesn't necessarily snap into resolution. What is one of the key elements here that's gonna allow us to control those 4 layers, and that's gonna allow us to control the fact that we should be locked into this layer 3 when our chanter comes in? Another pop quiz for Jim. Jim, you represent the common man.
The 2 things that come to my mind is my bag better be airtight so I can actually have control. And the
Sure,
other
let's
is
just
if my
call
reeds
that...
are calibrated.
Right. So let's call that good bagpipe maintenance. Obviously, that should go without saying for today's discussion. But then the second thing you said is what I was going for, which is...
Yeah. If my reeds are calibrated, then I can trust that they will snap into where they ought to be.
Yes.
Because they're all ready to vibrate at the right pressure.
So here's my drone reed calibration, right? If my drone reeds are too open, all right, what might happen is I strike my chanter in, and the increase in pressure, the chanter kicks in. We got this increase in pressure, but it's because my drone reed is still so open, my drone reed stays in layer 2 instead
Still
of
gurgling.
Instead of clearing. Sometimes you'll hear pipers refer to this as the drones clearing. So now the drones won't clear. So you'll end up with drones stuck in layer 2. And then here's the fun part, is that as a beginner, you might not even recognize that there is such a difference. You might not even realize that layer 2 versus layer 3 is a different thing. And then you'll go about trying to tune your drone to be in tune with the others while it's in layer 2. But layer 2 is very unstable, so the pitch is always moving around. It's very yucky, raucous, rough sounding, right? So you end up tuning these reeds in the wrong zone, so to speak. And then what makes that even more fun is maybe you have a blowing surge somewhere around bar 3. Because remember, we're talking about being a beginner here. So now you have a little blowing surge, which does result in the drone reed finally kicking into layer 3. And now the drone is wildly out of tune. And can you see how that can lead to a lot of confusion, right? That can lead to a lot of confusion for a player. Yeah, and frustration. So calibration of the reeds, which we won't talk about today, but calibration is just, we want to set the reeds so that they're not too open. And obviously, if they were too closed, they'll clamp shut on us. So we need to find that optimal amount of openness for us, depending on how strong our chanter reed is, so that when we strike in, the chanter comes in and the drones will clear for us. And then pop quiz for the common man. What is clearing referring to when it comes to our 4 layers? Clearing means what?
Layer 3.
Yeah, clearing means going from layer 2 to layer 3. Remember, layer 2 is sort of like, layer 2 is that It's like making a drone-ish sound, but it hasn't clicked in to
Yeah.
that stable sound. By the way, cane drone reeds, I play cane drone reeds when I play in Verarian District, and that's always a wild and crazy adventure. But you should know that the 4 layers of the drone reed sound, it's the same with cane as it is for synthetic. It's very strange. It's just very strange in the sense that why has nature done these 4 layers? It might just
Yeah.
be something to do with how a single reed behaves when it's attached to a tube. So there might be some sort
Mm.
of physical truth here about the drones so it's going to be fairly true. It's going to be fairly true for any drone reed that you choose. Now, of course, if you have a wild and crazy drone reed, I don't know if you remember the Omega drone reeds where they had a million moving bits and pieces and they had Allen keys and some sort of quantum computer built in. And they
Yeah, I
were,
never used them, but I saw those very impressive photos of them, yeah.
yeah, some of the wild and crazy reads, you don't necessarily get the predictable 4 layers maybe that you
Mm.
would get, but any normally constructed reed, okay, where we just, you have the reed body, you got the tongue, and you got the bridle that you can adjust, just standard drone reed design, you're going to hear those 4 layers. By the way, make sure as a beginner, that's the type of reed you're using, at least for starters, so that you can get used to some of these concepts and you understand what they're all about. And yet, understanding the 4 layers is just something you want to kind of understand.
It definitely is useful to put this into words. I have several students in the past that come to mind where I feel bad that I didn't serve them better because, as you say, it is confusing because it's kind of a drone sound. And so what I would tell them was something like, that doesn't sound right, squeeze a little harder or strike in again or whatever. And then my explanation to them was always something like, the more you do this, the more you'll get used to what drones are supposed to sound like, and so
Right.
then you'll know when it's not right, which is true, but that's not the most direct path to
For
being
sure.
able to understand what's going on and address it, you know?
Yeah, that bagpiping should be, I always say this, bagpiping should be easier said than done. That makes
Mm,
sense, right? Like,
that makes
it's
sense.
easier to talk about bagpipes than it is to do it. That's probably always going to be true. But a lot of times what you have is, it's not even easily said.
Mhm.
You're just kind of thrown into the deep end and you sort of like sink or swim. And it's just kind of like, well, if you don't sink, I guess maybe someday you'll be a bagpiper. Well, this is one of those things where having the requisite information is really helpful. And then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, they told me this might happen. They
Hmm.
told me that my reed might squeak here and then it might clear into this raucous sound. And they told me about this calibration stuff. Cool. So now you have a plan and now you can work through it. It is absolutely something, to your point, Jim, that's something most of us figured out on our own just by being thrown in the deep
Mhm.
end. But yeah.
Yeah. Enough strike-ins. And it does occur I'm curious what you think, Andrew. I've been insecure about this before, like when soloing. 'Cause, like, I feel like when I was first learning, my understanding of the ideal strike-in was as soon as you hit the bag, you go into zone 3, and you kind of
Mhm.
keep pressure on it as you put it under your arm, and then you
Nope.
play, and I was going for that, and so for me, it was a discovery when listening to I mean, like, there's some Gordon Duncan tracks that come immediately to mind when I
Yeah.
realized, "Oh, he's using the gurgle, and the
Yes.
effect of bringing it into zone 3 is actually really cool." So
Yes.
then I felt insecure about, like, what should I be doing in a band setting or as a soloist?
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, Andrew, do you think that this is actually an indication of a properly set up bagpipe that, like, if I'm able to actually punch into zone 3 without the chanter making noise, I've got some problems, like my chanter read
Uh,
is too hard in comparison to my drones?
yeah, maybe or something. Could be, could be. And I wouldn't
Mm,
overthink it too much. But here's what I would say. When we do a typical strike in, whether it be as a soloist or and then definitely as a member of a band, this, I think, and then the viewers in the comments can correct me here because I'm sort of speaking off the cuff here. But I think what's really going on is we need the strike in to allow us to skip zone 1, right? So when we
hmm,
strike in the bag, we need to kind of learn where to put our hand and how we're going to work the mechanics of it and how we're going to hold our bodies so that when we strike the bag, we skip layer 1 and go straight to layer 2 because we don't want to strike up at a funeral, right? We're about to play Amazing Grace, but we don't want 2 or 3 seconds of like
Right.
like the unpredictable high pitch. That's like unpredictable,
Maybe not 2 or 3
unpleasant.
seconds, maybe the whole song, because as you mentioned,
Right.
sometimes the drone gets stuck there and
For
doesn't leave
sure.
layer 1, so
So we really kind of want to strike in the bag, huh? Like it's going to go, huh? And it's not going to be, to your point, Jim, it might even be sort of like artistically, you can take the artistic angle and say, okay, we're going to strike in the bag and we're going to go straight to zone 2, which is sort of unpredictable, gurgly, dissonant sounding, right? And
Mhm.
then, zone 2 is where we want to go to. That's what this action, boink, where I'm striking my pipes in. That's what that action is for. We're trying to
Mhm.
not spend any time in zone 1 when we strike in our pipes. We want to go, oh, zone 2, gurgly, gurgly, gurgly under the arm, and then E or low A or something like that, where when the chanter strikes in, that's when everything should have cleared, boing, and we're sounding good. And you should go out in
Mm.
the wild, go on YouTube and watch some pipers playing bagpipes in the real world, and you'll find that the good sounding ones, that's what they do. And then when a
Yeah.
band strikes in, that's absolutely what we need. We don't
It's
want
even better.
any
Wild chaos.
squeaky phase 1 sounds. The bass drone is of course famous for getting stuck in zone 1, and that's the
Mm.
dreaded bass drone double toning sound. And
Yeah.
of course, that's like the arch enemy of a pipe band player, right? You don't want the bass drone to get stuck. So your strike-in technique and the setup of that reed has to be dialed in. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting way to think about it, right? And so when you're practicing and you're striking your pipes up from nothing, so the pipes aren't going at all yet. We want to do this action, boing, to get us right into zone 2. And then by the time the chanter's in, all the drones have cleared to zone 3. And then, of course,
Mhm.
if any of the drones shut off, that's what zone 4, that's what the layer 4 is referring to there, where it's become overwhelmed with air and the resulting thing is like no sound. So
Yeah.
that's just something I think about, or it's something that's worth kind of thinking about, is that as we add pressure to the reeds, it's going to introduce us to these different layers.
Mhm.
Hey everybody, Andrew Douglas here from the Piper's Dojo, and I just want to say thanks so much for listening to today's iteration of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, it would be super helpful to us and to a lot of bagpipers out there trying to find us if you could give us a top-notch review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast, particularly Apple, iTunes, and Spotify and things like that. Your review would be really, really helpful. So if you have a moment today, definitely go over there and help us out. Other than that, until we meet again on the podcast or somewhere else, thanks again for listening.